Hey, welcome to Caritas Querens. In this video, I'm recounting my own spiritual journey towards confident universalism. And if you've been following so far, in the last video, I basically had gotten to the point where I was pretty confident that as a Catholic, that universalism was harmonious with the rest of the teaching of the Catholic Church, specifically that there was no discord or no essential disagreement between universalism and the doctrine of endless hell. Okay, but even at that point, I was still a little bit concerned because I just thought, the church has not taught universal salvation for upwards of 1,500 years. Or, no, I mean, no, I should say no Catholic has taught it seriously, and pretty strongly for upwards of 1,500 years. And so I thought, it makes sense to me that they're harmonious, that it could work. But, like, why there's this emphasis on endless hell? Is it just the kind of, eventually the church realized, okay, these were just, universalism was just kind of a silly, sort of childish belief, and now we've grown out of that, and is my attempt to harmonize the two, is it just kind of fruitless? Is it just kind of pointless? But I came at the next stage of my life in this journey, I came to see the importance of universalism in relation to the rest of the teachings of the church, including the doctrine of endless hell. And I guess you could say kind of, on the other hand, I saw the importance of the doctrine of endless hell even in relation to universal salvation. So I began to see, in other words, it began to make sense to me why even for so long the church has focused on endless hell. And so I saw it as not just like, okay, I'm just groping at straws, trying to find some way to synthesize or to harmonize universalism and the church's teaching on endless hell. No, I got to the point where I realized that in a way, maybe it was kind of good that for a while the two were separated, because now we can see them, when you see them far apart for a while, now when you put them together again, you can see just how mutually enriching they are, how they kind of perfect each other and complete each other. So let me explain a little bit, okay? So I was at the stage where I was willing to accept universalism. I found several ways to harmonize it with the church's teaching on endless hell. So I was feeling pretty, at least intellectually, pretty comfortable with the idea. But still frustrating to me was like, why did the church not teach this for so long, and why is it that, most universalists reject the idea of endless hell? Just why don't the two mix, if they're harmonious, then why don't Catholics see that? Why do they reject universalism? If they're harmonious, why do universalists not see that? Why do universalists reject endless hell? Okay. And, I just was kind of at my wit's end, and I was getting to the point where I was thinking, okay, in practice, in reality, nobody else sees these two doctrines as harmonious, So in practice, it's like I was thinking, it's unlikely that the church is ever going to teach universal salvation. So am I going to have to just kind of be a fringe Catholic, for the rest of my life, and just kind of toe the line, or, kind of, be very close to heresy? Or am I gonna wholesale embrace universalism, and basically, kind of just, for all intents and purposes, not be a Catholic anymore? And even if I, in my heart, still believe that in the Catholic Church and want to be a member, everybody's going to reject me, because because even universalists, don't accept endless hell. So I just felt like, where can I fit in, and I just kept thinking to myself that really, practically speaking, how can I harmonize universalism and endless hell in practice? I would be an outcast among Catholics who reject universalism, and I would be an outcast among universalists who reject endless hell. And in the midst of this, it dawned on me one time. one of the things that I find beautiful about Catholic theology, about just in general, I would even say the most of Christian theology, is how the different facets of what we believe, different facets of revelation, they're mutually enriching. For instance, let me take an example: the belief in the incarnation of Jesus and the belief in sacramentality, okay, in the Catholic Church. I would say realistically that those two doctrines are so closely related, and they shed light on each other. In fact, I would go so far as to say that without understanding the incarnation, you really can't understand completely the church's teaching on sacramentality. On the other hand, I would say vice versa, that without understanding the church's teaching on sacramentality, you can't completely understand the incarnation. The two are mutually enriching, and in fact, the two, in a sense, complete each other. They perfect each other. Okay? So there's a part of me that would say I would never, part of the reason I would never want to reject the incarnation is because without it, everything else I believe doesn't quite make sense. Part of the reason I would never want to reject sacraments is because without sacramentality, the rest of my faith doesn't really completely make sense. Okay? And so I began to think, so maybe endless hell is not an obstacle to believing in universalism. And in fact, maybe not only is it not an obstacle, maybe it is actually a great benefit to understanding universalism. In other words, I began to see that just as in the parallel example of the incarnation and sacramentality, that without universalism, the church's teaching on hell doesn't quite make sense. I mean, I saw that earlier on when I was struggling with predestination, okay? But also vice versa. Without the church's teaching on endless hell, the doctrine of universalism doesn't make complete sense. Let me explain it briefly. I've already gone into this a little bit in my video on Can a Catholic be a Universalist, but let me put it this way. Without universalism, as I mentioned earlier in looking at predestination, we run the risk of losing some of the greatness of God. It becomes very difficult when you really follow the idea of endless hell without universalism. When you follow that to its complete consequences, it's very hard to believe that God is truly an omnipotent, all-knowing, all-wise, all-good, loving Father. So we lose something of the fatherhood of God, I would say, when we reject universalism. But when we reject endless hell, I think we risk losing something else too. See, my understanding is that hell is, in a sense, God's solution to that part of us that is irreformable, unreconcilable, to what St. Paul calls the old man, okay, which has been crucified and has died and buried with Christ. And if that's the case, if there's something in us that which is kind of essentially a rejection of God, I would say it's kind of tantamount to what the church calls original sin, and is kind of renewed in what the church calls mortal sin. Anyway, I would say if we lose that sense of endless hell, then what does sanctification really mean? Is there just am I just the old man that has been kind of transformed into something new? But that's not how St. Paul talks about it. The old man has been crucified, and put to death. I have died with Christ, and yet I live. So I think when we keep endless hell in the picture, we see what happens to the old man. We see that although we were created with the capacity for God, with the capacity for union with God, nevertheless, we were created in and of ourselves completely insufficient for that union with God. And so that's part of what we need to realize, is that in and of ourselves, we need to die. The old man has to be crucified, has to die, and it has to be a perpetual and endless separation. We have to be completely, forever separated from whatever would keep us from union with God. And if we lose endless hell, we lose that endless separation. And if we lose that endless separation, then again, we lose that sense of God's grace and what he has done for us, that he has put to death the old man, and that we have, in doing so, we have died with Christ. Even that death is in union with Christ, and risen with Christ to newness of life. So I think that there's actually great benefit, especially in our understanding of sanctification, of the spiritual life, of union with Christ, which is the essence of the Christian life. So, and seeing this, even now, I just feel kind of giddy, because I have this great joy in realizing not only does universalism make sense, not only can I harmonize it with the church's teaching on endless hell, and if you're not a Catholic, I would say you could harmonize it with the Baptist teaching on endless hell, or the Presbyterian, or the Lutheran, or the Episcopalian, or whatever, Methodist, understanding of endless hell. Okay, it can be reconciled, but not only that. Actually, the two are mutually enriching and complete each other. And to me, that's just a compelling argument or compelling evidence for the reality, for the truth of universalism. That not only does it shed light on everything else in the faith, but universalism itself has light shed on it by other elements of the faith, including endless hell. I hope you see what I mean. I'm kind of waxing poetic here, I guess, a little bit, and I'm kind of I have a hard time explaining this, but for me that's more compelling, more convincing evidence for the truth of universal salvation. And so I began to see that this is so important, not just for me to have peace of mind or to be able to relate to God, in the light of predestination and so on, but this is important for the church, for believers, because this is a missing puzzle piece that will help everyone to understand the faith more perfectly, and which will also, incidentally, help non-Catholic universalists, other universalists who reject endless hell, maybe help them to understand universalism more perfectly. So it became more and more obvious to me, or more and more important to me, I would say as well, to believe this, to accept this, so that people could start dialoguing about this, engaging with this idea, and seeing this as a reality. Seeing this as kind of a living reality. That's what living things do, right? They influence other things. So if universalism and endless hell can mutually enrich each other, that shows that they're both alive and that they fit together. They work together. But I still found myself in this kind of alone. Do a Google search, look around. There's hardly any Catholics talking about seriously engaging with the idea of universalism, and very few. In fact, I know of one, or maybe two, who are even open to the idea that universalism and endless hell might actually be harmonious and beneficial to each other. So that still left me with, I guess I could say, sort of, the leap of faith, or the leap of my heart. And that's what I'll get into in the next video. So until then, adios.